Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Welcome back to our ProRevenge channel. In this episode, you're going to hear 8 revenge stories. The first story is about a delivery driver who gets fired because of the op and then goes after him. The second story involves OP and his friends getting revenge on a person who keeps blocking his car. Finally, we'll wrap up with a story about why you should never be lazy in school and why you should always do your own work. But let's be real, who hasn't copied off someone at school? My friends, I hope you stick around for these stories today and hit that subscribe button for future stories. Let's dive in, guys. So, I was driving down a small road with a 45-mile-per-hour speed limit that some people choose to ignore. A work truck came up behind me, and the driver got right on my bumper. I'm not driving a tiny car, but it's a sedan, and he was so close that all I could see in my mirrors was his grille and hood while I maintained the speed limit. After about 3 minutes, he decided that a sharp curve was the perfect time to pass me. Surprise, surprise, there was a car coming around the curve. He swerved toward me, and I slammed on the brakes, narrowly missing his bumper. Thankfully, I had all of this recorded on my dash cam, both front and back. When I got home, I transferred the footage to my laptop and called the company's 1-800 number, providing the driver's plate number and truck number. The woman I spoke to was very apologetic and asked me to send her the video. She watched it while we were on the phone and then asked if she could put me on hold. I agreed, and a few minutes later, she returned with the local store manager on the line. She had sent him the video, and the manager apologized profusely, promising me right then and there that the employee was terminated for his reckless behavior. A week passed, and I didn't hear anything until a friend on Facebook sent me a link. The fired driver had somehow obtained my name from the company's HR manager and was trying to track me down in real life because he lost his job. He even made a video, still wearing his work uniform, threatening violence against me. I went to my local police station, showed them the video, and explained everything. They advised me to contact the company again because they had let my name slip out, which should have been confidential. I called the company and explained the situation. They told me I would receive a call from their HR department within 2 to 3 business days. Literally 6 hours later, I got a call from a senior HR person, along with someone from their legal team. They asked me to sign a document stating that I wouldn't publicly criticize them or give negative PR if they pursued legal action against the driver and obtained a restraining order on my behalf. They even offered to have a lawyer of my choosing review the document at no cost to me. I signed it and let them handle it. A few weeks later, my friend on Facebook told me that the driver's mom had posted a sob story online, saying her son was facing an expensive court case he was unlikely to win because the opposing team had over 10 lawyers. So not only did this guy lose his job, but when he tried to come after me, his ex-employer sued him. Hold up a minute. I don't understand how the company got away with leaking OP's name to that reckless driver. I'm 100% certain that information should have been kept confidential. OP, I'm so confused. Next story. Now on to the next story. I live in an apartment building with end-to-end parking, providing 2 spaces per apartment. I only have 1 car, so I sometimes let my friends park in the space in front of mine if they give me notice. Generally, I park at the back of the double space. Earlier this year, a random car started parking in front of mine on Friday afternoons, meaning I couldn't use my car on Friday nights. It was annoying, but not a huge issue since I live close to the city. This went on nearly every week for about 5 weeks when I didn't park at the front of the bay. I started parking there to prevent it, but on occasions when I left the space free for friends or other plans, the car would appear again. I made repeated attempts to stop this by leaving notes explaining that if it happened again, I'd press charges or have the vehicle towed. Well, it happened again, and this time I was still there on Saturday afternoon when I had planned to go away with a group of friends. My guess is someone went out on Friday, got drunk, and decided to pick up their car later, not caring about the inconvenience it caused. The car clearly hadn't moved, as my strongly worded note was still sitting limply under their wiper blades. I'd had enough, and decided it was time to have the vehicle towed. I called the building management and eventually a towing company, but they refused to help because the space was on the 3rd floor and their trucks couldn't navigate the height and space restrictions. Most people would be stuck at that point, and I briefly considered sitting on the hood of the car until the owner showed up, while sending my friends on their way without me. But that would have forced them to rearrange their transport, as 1 car wouldn't have been enough. Fortunately, my parents live 30 minutes away, and they have a garage where I work on a car that's nearing the end of a minor restoration. I often use a set of vehicle positioning jacks to push my project car against the garage wall to save space. For those who don't know, vehicle positioning jacks are devices that slide under each wheel and lift the car on hydraulics, allowing you to move it freely in any direction. A brilliant idea hit me. My friends didn't mind spending an extra hour to mess with someone who had inconvenienced us. We grabbed the jacks, went back, and propped up the car. 6 guys can easily move a small hatchback, so we carefully pushed it across the level to an area without designated parking, behind a load-bearing pillar with just enough space for a car. This section of the garage was unlit and out of the way. Typically, a guy on my level parks his motorbike there, but he isn't supposed to, and I doubted he'd mind. We positioned the car between the pillar and the wall, with the nose facing the wall, and I took back my angry note. We removed the jacks and left to enjoy our weekend. When we returned on Monday morning after the long weekend, the car was still there, which wasn't surprising since there was only about a foot of space between the pillar and the car, and another foot or so between the car and the wall. The front wheels had shifted slightly, suggesting the owner tried and failed to move it. The car was gone later that week, though I'm not sure how they managed it, and I never saw it again. Guys, I have one question. How in the world does someone keep parking in the same spot after multiple notes on their windshield telling them they can't park there? Is this entitlement? Can they not read? This is absolutely ridiculous. Next story. Now for the next story. My friend in Korea studies fashion design. She sometimes sends me sketches of her designs, and they all look amazing, though I'm not really into fashion. She's particularly interested in designing handbags and purses. She told me a story about how she shut down one of the most entitled, self-centered, lazy students on campus. The cast of this story includes Grace, our main character, Jane, the problematic one, and the professor, their course instructor. At first, Grace and Jane got along well, bonding over similar interests and quickly becoming close friends. Grace shared her sketches and designs for handbags and purses with Jane, who was very impressed. Even the professor was impressed, and it was no surprise that Grace earned a high mark on their first major exam. Jane, however, did poorly and started following Grace everywhere to get tips on improving. Grace decided to help her out, but Jane turned out to be one of the most entitled, lazy, and selfish people Grace had ever met. Jane's annoying behaviors included not paying attention, being late to study sessions, never showing appreciation, not paying for coffee or snacks, and constantly complaining about how hard it was to draw something. After a week, Grace gave up and refused to meet Jane outside of class. Time passed, and for their midterm, everyone in the class had to present their designs. When it was Jane's turn, Grace was shocked to see that Jane had stolen one of her designs. Thankfully, Grace had multiple designs, so there was no conflict when it was her turn to present, but she was furious. Grace met with the professor afterward, who was aware of the situation but couldn't do much because Jane was the daughter of the school's chairman, who had apparently blackmailed the professor into giving Jane top grades. However, the professor helped Grace devise a plan to expose and humiliate Jane. For the final exam, the professor announced that the class would present 3 designs each, emphasizing that they needed to bring their best work because industry professionals, along with the head of the department and the chairman, would be grading. Grace had a separate sketchbook with designs from major brands like Michael Kors and Coach, which she never used directly for class assignments but as inspiration for her own work. Grace pretended to reconnect with Jane and brought this sketchbook to their meetings, all while secretly working on her new designs and keeping them hidden from Jane on. The day of the presentations, Grace and the professor were ready, knowing what was about to happen. Grace went first and received a lot of praise from the judges. After a few more presentations, Jane went last. Her presentation featured designs copied from not 1, not 2, but 3 different companies. According to Grace, here's how it went down. Judge 1 asked, "So, you're saying you designed all these by yourself, right?" Jane replied, "That's right." Judge 1 pressed, "And you swear these are your designs, and you didn't copy them from anything else, right?" Jane said, "I swear." Judge 1 responded, "Are you aware that your designs are from 3 brands currently on the market, and some of them are among the most popular designs?" Judge 2 chimed in, "Yeah, I was going to bring this up. If you had worked for any brand, you would likely have been fired, or worse, sued. Did you honestly think this would work? We've been in the industry for over 10 years. We can spot a copycat." Jane stammered, "But these aren't even my designs. They're from Grace." Judge 3 turned to Grace and asked, "Is this true?" Grace replied, "Yes, but I would never use them for major projects or claim them as my own. I only use sketches of them as inspiration for my designs." Judge 3 said, "That was clear from your presentation." Turning back to Jane, they added, "Miss Jane, this is a clear case of plagiarism, and I hope your school handles this matter with mercy." After the presentation, the chairman screamed at the professor in front of everyone, unknowingly revealing his blackmail and secret grade deals. Jane tried to call out Grace, accusing her of setting her up, but no one listened to her attempts to deflect blame. Jane was expelled from the school, and the chairman lost all support, forcing him to resign. He was replaced by a far more honorable and competent leader. So, what's the point of even being in that class if your dad just blackmails the teacher to give you good grades? What's that going to achieve in the future? She'll graduate without knowing how to design anything. Next story. I worked at a retail chain that sold pet supplies and products. When I started, it was fantastic, a family-owned business where everyone I worked with was great. The owners eventually decided to retire and sold the small chain to an investment group. Once the investment group took over, almost all employees were either let go, forced out, or quit. I stayed on for a little while longer until I got promoted at my other job. The new company brought in a new manager to my store, which was the top-performing store in the entire chain, bringing in about $10,000 to $12,000 a day on average. It was always more on weekends and especially around the holidays. The new manager, let's call him Mr. Company Man, was all about following the company's rules. The company told him they only wanted employees around for 2 to 3 years, but I and 2 others had been there for over 10 years. Naturally, he started causing trouble and giving us a hard time. Unfortunately, he targeted me first. Mr. Company Man found out I worked 2 jobs, which were in completely unrelated fields, so there was no chance of a conflict of interest. However, my second job required me to work nights and weekends. When he found out, he demanded I work nights and weekends at the store too, claiming it was only fair for everyone. I explained that I didn't work those shifts because I was the store's only OSHA-certified forklift operator, and deliveries only came on weekday mornings. Mr. Company Man didn't want to hear it. He told me I either had to work nights and weekends, or it would be my last day. I told him, "Don't threaten me with a good time. I suppose today's my last day then." I was pretty upset about it, but it wasn't a big deal in the end. It turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. I went home early without finishing my shift. When I got home, I decided to call my local OSHA inspector and report the store for not having a certified forklift operator on staff, along with numerous other safety hazards. Needless to say, they lost nearly 3 weeks' worth of profit due to all the violations the inspector found. I was surprised they even followed up. In my state, the inspector calls you back after an inspection to let you know if your claims were valid. Mine were, and Mr. Company Man got chewed out so badly that he ended up quitting. Guys, one thing I've learned from reading pro-revenge stories is this: if you own a company and cut corners or do shady things to save money, you need to be extra careful about who you upset. I've worked for a few questionable construction companies in the past where employees were fired and came back with a vengeance, costing the company thousands of dollars. I'd always laugh quietly to myself because they truly deserved it. Next story. This next story isn't my revenge but my mother-in-law's. She's a well-off woman who owns a large number of rental properties. She and her husband had a massive house just outside New York City, complete with an indoor pool, a sauna, elevators, and more. It's worth well into the 7 figures and is only 5 minutes from downtown Manhattan. Sadly, her husband passed away, and she remarried and moved out of state. She put the house up for rent shortly after. A broker approached her with 2 prospective tenants who were music producers with some legitimate acts they worked with. One was the business guy, and the other, whom I'll call Ben, was the creative talent. In the beginning, the 2 were partners, and the business guy ensured the rent was paid on time. He was professional and didn't mess around. They used the house as a place for artists to relax and work on their music. After a couple of years, the business guy and Ben had a falling out, and the business guy left. Ben stayed and, at first, continued to pay the rent on time. But after a few months, payments started arriving later and later. Late payments weren't the worst thing. Owning real estate comes with challenges. But Ben started getting aggressive and rude when my mother-in-law insisted on timely payments. She's not a mean person and values politeness and manners above all else. Finally, she had enough and had him evicted. After the eviction, they inspected the house and found over $100,000 in damage: cigarette burns in the carpet, stains on the walls, damaged pool filters, plumbing issues, and more. She took him to court, won, and had a lien placed on all his property. Ben was broke at this point, aside from his home, so she didn't see the point in trying to get money from someone who had none. She moved on. Fast forward about 15 years. My mother-in-law received a notice in the mail that the bank was foreclosing on Ben's home. Because she had a lien on all his assets, the bank asked a judge to dismiss her lien so they could collect what they were owed from the sale of the home. She was ready to contest this but then got clever. She approached the bank and said, "Look, sell me the house at fair market value minus what I'm owed, and you'll save on foreclosure costs, brokers, lawyers, and more. I have cash on hand, so it's a win-win for everyone." The bank agreed, and she purchased the house for nearly 25% below market value. Mind you, that 25% was money she was owed anyway, but she never thought she'd see it again. Given Ben's past behavior, she wasn't going to let him off without knowing who took his house. She found out the day they were moving out and stopped by. Ben had trouble recognizing her since it had been over a decade since they last spoke. Once he realized who she was, he lashed out verbally. She didn't say a word, she just smiled. She has since rented out his former home to a lovely family with no issues. There's something so satisfying about an unplanned revenge that unfolds over a decade later. I love that she stopped by and made it clear she was the new owner of his place. Absolutely brilliant. Next story. Back in my college days, several friends and I went to Lake Havasu, Arizona for spring break. Those of you who've been there probably hung out at the London Bridge Resort at some point. Next to the hotel area, there's a walking path that follows a canal, which leads under the old London Bridge and then to Lake Havasu itself. This canal allows people to park their boats within walking distance of the resort. One night, 3 of my friends and I went for a stroll along the path. During our walk, we heard some shouting along the lines of, be cool, we're just leaving, man, be cool." My group hung back for a bit. After a moment, a group of guys came up and we asked them what was going on. They said 2 guys in a boat were flashing people in the face with a spotlight, annoying them, and then pulled out a pistol when confronted. We'll refer to the guys in the boat as troublemakers from here on out. My group decided we weren't going to let this slide and came up with a plan. We continued down the pathway to the troublemakers' boat and played dumb. We asked them, "What are those guys so scared of?" Being the smug, self-satisfied individuals they were, they said, "Those guys wanted to pick a fight with us, so I pulled my gun on them. It was actually an old .38 revolver. I knew this was going to be easy." One member of our group was a beautiful girl wearing a bikini and cut-off jean shorts. She played the clueless card and, in no time, had them eating out of her hand. She said, "I've never seen a gun before. Is it heavy? Do you have any more?" Those fools handed her their gun to hold and said, "No, that's the only one." She then passed it to her friend Jay, who's a 6'4", 280-pound wall of muscle. Jay threw the gun nearly 250 feet into the canal, making a very satisfying splash when it hit the water. Both troublemakers were completely speechless. It took them nearly 20 seconds to process what had happened. Finally, one of them said, "Why did you do that? You'd better go get it." We just laughed and said, "No, we won't. Think about that the next time you're flashing people with that spotlight." After a few moments of incoherent shouting, one of them tried to get in Jay's face for some reason. He didn't even make it out of the boat before Jay shoved him back into a seat hard enough to break it. Neither of the 2 guys was very big, and even our girlfriend could have handled them. Our friend Jace told them to park somewhere else for the night because if we saw them again, we'd deal with them for real. So, if any of you visit Lake Havasu, grab your snorkel. There's an old, rusted pistol at the bottom of the canal by the London Bridge Resort. The execution on this one was pretty impressive, but am I the only one who thinks things could have gone completely wrong for this group? Approaching a bunch of idiots who are flashing lights in people's faces and pulling out weapons isn't exactly the safest idea. Next story. I was on a business trip to a client in Philadelphia, located just far enough from the city to make a cab ride expensive, but not so far as to warrant a rental car. I flew in, took an airport cab to the client, and was there for a week, getting picked up and dropped off at my hotel by taxi. On Friday, the client called a cab for me to return to the airport. The driver of my cab was distracted and not paying attention to the road. After a couple of miles, he hit another car. Fortunately, it was a low-speed collision, barely fast enough to deploy airbags, and everyone walked away unharmed. However, I had to wait for the police to arrive to give a statement, and I insisted the cab company send another car with a different driver to take me to the airport. A couple of minutes into waiting, I noticed the driver had left the meter running, which I insisted he stop. All told, I was there for about an hour between waiting for the police, talking to them, convincing them not to force me to go to the hospital, and waiting for the new cab to arrive. While I'd left early for my flight, by the time I got to the airport, I had to rush to make it. You'd think if you ran a cab company and your driver hit a car with a passenger inside, You'd ensure they got to their destination safely and hope they didn't sue. But not only did the second cabbie run the meter and ask me to pay, he also said the owner of the cab company insisted he collect the fare from the first cab's meter too. He had the decency to look ashamed about it, so I wasn't too harsh with him personally. I calmly told him that I recognized the law allowed me to be charged for the trip, though good business practice would suggest otherwise. I added that if I hadn't been charged, I would have given him a good tip, but now he'd get none because I was offended. I then told him to tell his boss what I was going to do. My client was a major bank, not Bank of America, but a few years later it was acquired by them, so you can think of it as that size. They frequently had consultants and contractors in town and always used this cab company for local travel. I was returning in 2 weeks, so on Monday morning I called my contact at the client to inform them about the accident and politely asked them to find another cab company for me to use. My contact was horrified and ensured that their employees, consultants, and contractors would never use that cab company again. Next story. I'm a 17-year-old web developer who makes basic websites to earn money for video games. The job's pretty easy for the pay. I got picked up by a local bakery to create a website so people could pre-order cakes and other items online. I agreed to do it for 700 rupees, which is about $10. Insanely cheap, even for India, but I'm just after video game money, so I was fine with it. I told them explicitly, you pay me $10 and use another $10 to buy a domain and $5 to rent servers. The total is $25. They gave me $15 to set everything up. Once the website was fully operational, I asked for my payment, but they refused, saying that since I wasn't hosting the server, I didn't deserve compensation. Apparently, they think time has no value. The thing is, I still had access to their server because I had the credentials. So, I went home, logged in, and made one small change. The website had a customer page showing orders and a page for the store owners to see orders and payments. I added a subtle may contain trace amounts of unexpected ingredients warning to all the product details on the order confirmation page for customers. Some items randomly said special frosting or similar. Imagine browsing a website for cakes and seeing that in the product details. Wild. It's pretty sweet revenge though. These stories are a delightful mix of cunning and karma, and I'm hooked on the creativity behind each act of malicious compliance. The reckless driver story infuriates me. Tailgating at 45 miles per hour and passing on a curve is dangerous, and I've been in similar situations where reckless drivers scare me senseless. OP's dashcam footage and quick reporting were brilliant, leading to the driver's termination. But the company leaking OP's name? That's a massive breach. The legal team's swift action and restraining order were satisfying, though I'm still shocked at the driver's audacity to threaten violence. The parking garage tale is next-level petty. I love it. I've dealt with entitled parkers, and moving the car with jacks to an impossible spot is genius. The owner's struggle to free their car is poetic justice for ignoring multiple notes. It's a reminder that entitlement doesn't trump consequences. The fashion design story is a masterclass in setup. Jane's plagiarism and entitlement, banking on her dad's influence, are infuriating. I've seen lazy peers coast on others' work, and Grace's trap with the fake sketchbook was brilliant. Exposing Jane in front of industry pros and her father's downfall, chef's kiss. The pet store story resonates. Mr. Company Man's push for impossible shifts shows corporate ignorance. Quitting and reporting OSHA violations was a power move. The store losing weeks of profit is sweet justice for undervaluing skilled workers. The landlord revenge is satisfyingly long game. Ben's disrespect and property damage deserved consequences. The mother-in-law's silent smile as she claimed his foreclosed home is iconic. Patience yields perfect revenge. The Lake Havasu story is bold but risky. Tossing the gun into the canal was gutsy against armed troublemakers. I admire the nerve but would have worried about escalation. The cab company fiasco is maddening. Charging OP after an accident is shameless. Blacklisting them with a major client was smart. Hitting their wallet hurts. The bakery prank is cheeky. The bakery's refusal to pay for labor is absurd, and adding unexpected ingredients warnings is a hilarious jab. These stories show clever compliance outsmarts entitlement every time. And that, my friends, wraps up another episode of our ProRevenge channel. If you missed the last episode, check it out. I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you!